I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. This podcast is about leadership on every level, and often the greatest risks to leaders and organizations come not from what's happening inside their companies, but from what's happening outside of them. Jim Collins, in the book How the Mighty Fall, shows how blind spots can take down even the strongest organizations. Many of those blind spots weren't internal at all. They came from the larger environment leaders failed to see. It's like the frog in the pan of water. If you were that frog, you would want to know if the pan was sitting on a stove. In the same way, this podcast is about seeing the context outside our walls, the world around us that we often miss, but that shapes everything we do. Today, I sit down with David Prescott and Michael Ashley to talk about ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance, and refers to the standards large companies are expected to follow to earn strong ESG scores, which influence their ability to attract funding and investment. They share when ESG started, how it evolved, and why it matters now. We explore the origins of social responsible investing, the shift from shareholder to stakeholder capitalism, and how ESG became a stick rather than a carrot for companies. We get into the penalties companies face when they don't conform, how global competitors like China are shaping the energy and AI race, and why these issues may be less about regulation and more about national security and even personal freedom. David and Michael also raise bigger questions. Are we in a spiritual battle between control and freedom? Is America falling behind while our competitors scale faster? And what can leaders and everyday citizens do to wake up to these external forces before it's too late? It's a fascinating and urgent conversation, and I think it will leave you with a different lens for looking at leadership today. So stay with us, and if you find this discussion valuable, share it with a colleague or leave a review to help us keep these important conversations going. This is Leadovation Podcast. I'm Dean Newland. Let's dive in. So David and Michael, it's nice to have you on the show. Really glad to see you guys from different parts of the United States. Let's start off with some basics here. Could you kind of explain the history of ESG? I know it kind of started, if I may remember, in the 60s and 70s with respect to trying to get options for investors to invest in things a little bit more socially responsible based on their perception. What happened? Where has it gone from there, and where are we at now? Just kind of give us a big picture perspective. Define it for those who don't know.
David, you want me to take this, or do you want?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Sure. Well, it goes back to a bunch of different organizations, including the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and then as well as some other NGOs. But basically, the idea was that a certain group of very well-connected, wealthy individuals decided that we needed to change the definition of capitalism. And so there were papers. One of the most seminal ones was a paper called Who Cares Wins. And the idea was that in the past, capitalism, the idea that most people understood is that capitalism existed to provide shareholder value. Well, there was a very important meeting, the Business Executive Roundtable in 2019, where they moved to something called stakeholder capitalism. And the idea is that businesses are not just in the business of making money, but they're in the business of helping and helping the outcomes for various stakeholders. Now, stakeholders can be everybody from the shareholders, people on the board, but they can also include your vendors, your customers, and really anything, including the environment. And so we see the rise of a lot of different organizations working towards increasing their ESG score by getting involved in social causes that have nothing to do with making money. And
So,
so that
Michael,
is,
just if I could stop for a second. So, is this directly related to, sorry for interrupting, with B Corps and that whole movement?
well,
Or are they're very different?
I think there's some, yes, I think there's some overlap in the idea that they want to do good in the world, and I have no problem with B Corps at all. I think that if I could speak for David, our concern is that when we begin mandating um, people's morality and the ways their behavior, right, with the punitive aspects. When I think of B Corps, I think of more of the carrot approach. When I think of ESG, I think of the stick approach,
Hmm.
whereby if you do not do good based on what they consider to be good, and we can get into that, then you will be punished. And so that takes the form of, not being able to have access to capital. It takes the form of people not wanting to invest in your company. It takes the form of other organizations, including BlackRock, dictating who should be on your board. And so, just to summarize this discussion, we are not opposed to doing good. We actually believe in doing good in the world, but the idea that some organization or some group of organizations can mandate what is acceptable and what is not, and that you will be penalized, you and your company, that is what we are against. And that is really the danger of what's going on with ESG.
Okay, good. Thank you for that the history lesson there. So then, David, how are people or organizations being penalized based on what Michael just said? Aside from, capital, other forms of penalizing organizations if we don't follow this mandate?
Dean, what I've seen, and so I have an environmental consulting company. We do a lot of work in the Permian Basin, which is the largest oil and gas producing region in the United States. And we saw very early on, back in 19 and 20, and this is one of the stories we have in the book, being penalized, hydrocarbon companies, oil and gas exploration and production companies being told by their sponsors and their private equity sponsors, do not spend another damn dollar on hydrocarbons. Well, how do you do that
Hmm.
in when you're in the oil and gas business? How do you not produce hydrocarbons? It's a very expensive uh, business process to go out, secure land, to get the rigs, to drill the holes, produce the wells, and then ultimately bring that production online. And from a penalizing issue, the ESG scores of major companies were negatively being influenced. If you look at any investment, software program or any investment group, you're going to have an ESG rating. And if you're not giving the environmental, the social, and the governance scores that those companies want, your stock price is negatively impacted. And so we saw from a 16 to an 18% of Wall Street's money going into energy stocks all the way down to 3% in 2000. On the inverse, China, India, all the other companies that are competing against us, they're all doing everything they can to get and extract hydrocarbons at the highest level. And so the penalization is if you're not following the environmental guidance, the social guidance, and the governance of what these companies want, then you're not going to receive the capital. And what greater penalty is there if you don't have enough
Hmm.
funds to operate?
Understood. So we have a new administration, obviously, that seems from the outside perspective could be very favorable for the kind of things that you're proposing. What is going on under the current Trump administration? I think we have this conversation happening in August 26, 2025. So somebody might be listening to this much, much later. But what's the landscape today versus the way it was before?
Well, if I could, can I jump on this real quick, David?
You bet. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I think that the major issue, the concern that we have about this is that on the surface, it may seem superficially like the culture has moved on from some of the more stringent social cause issues around ESG. So, for instance, the Trump administration has been very vocal about being opposed to quotas when it comes to things like DEI. They want to change different language on websites and the ways that universities deal with this issue, which is part of it, but it's not really the whole thing. And so my concern, I think David shares it, is that on the one hand, there's tremendous lip service that's being rolled out in service of being opposed to these social cultural ideas. However, at the same time, technological advancements are proceeding extremely rapidly. So right now we are in another Cold War, this time with China, when it comes to who will be the leader around AI. And so it's no secret that Palantir is being used for a number of different purposes with the Trump administration to track all kinds of things. Everything from using facial recognition technology to using predictive algorithms to determine what your behavior may be in the future. And so while at the same time, we're not hearing so much about these social cultural issues publicly, the infrastructure is being rolled out from a technological standpoint to continue to use this sort of tyranny to force upon people and businesses especially the same kind of tyranny, but now it is aided and abetted through advancements of artificial intelligence.
So let me stop for that. So are you making the claim that these technological advances are obviously very intrusive, but are you making some sort of connection back to ESG, or is it just a separate issue, but it's the same principle that we are having our liberties being affected?
Well, I mean, let's look at central bank digital currencies. Right now, there's been a big push around something called stablecoin, right? And so central bank digital currencies are programmable money, right?
Right.
And so right now, the public is being ushered into, is being led towards this idea that this is the new way of conducting business, with the idea that we don't want to be using cash anymore. Okay, fine. So let's imagine that we're 5 or 6 years from now, and all of us are using, for the most part, programmable money. And let's also say that ESG comes back into fashion. Okay, so if that is the case, and your business is not adhering to, let's say, environmental quotas, going back to what David mentioned, if you, let's say, your hydrocarbon usage exceeds the threshold of what the current administration wants, you could imagine that your money is suddenly shut off, because in the ensuing years, they were able to use various technological advances to enable them to better use central bank digital currencies.
So, David, that's really interesting, Michael. So, we've been hearing a lot over the summer around a lot of people getting into programmable money as an investment. Is that something that the two of you would, support, or is this already too late? We're already heading that direction. The Trump administration is putting a lot of energy into this area as well. Is this a dangerous way to invest because of what Michael just said, that in another administration, we might see the resurgence of ESG, and all of a sudden now we have another infrastructure to, hold us back? What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm not versed enough on programmable money to have an opinion at this point. So
Okay.
I would have to pull back on that and do some more research. So I apologize for not
No worries.
being ready for that. But going into the pendulum swinging in terms of administration policy, as we see every 4 to 8 years in this country, we have huge swings. And I will tell you, with a little bit of levity, it was absolutely a horrible time to publish a book on ESG, because I think we published the 28th, Michael, of October, whatever that Tuesday was. I don't remember what the exact day was.
24.
Last year, right? Like a week
last year,
before
right before
the
he got
election.
elected.
Yeah, and then he's elected within 90 days. The folks that had pre-read or had been advisors to us on the book, they were like, "Man, did you guys have like a crystal ball, or were you guys fortune tellers? How did you know all this was going to be stopped?" And I said, "Yeah, well, it all stopped, which is fantastic, but it was horrible for book sales, right? So we needed to, it would have been
Just
a little
wait
bit
another 4 or 8 years.
Yeah, I think that's it. So on the pendulum swing going back, we have to be aware as a country that it's going to take every ounce of every piece of energy we can create: solar, wind, hydrocarbons, natural gas, coal, everything that we have to keep our country relevant right now, especially as folks are migrating south. The temperature, the heating and cooling. Peter Zion with Zion Geopoliticist Political Group. He's a strategist, used to be with Stratfor. 30 times more lines than we have now. 30 times more just to keep up with demand.
When you
Here's
say
some
lines of what, David?
the
Transmission
transmission
lines.
line.
Okay.
Yeah, just to keep up. And with the growth that we have, AI needs two things. They need electricity and they need water. Electricity to run, water to cool them down. That's the lifeblood of AI. So right now, we don't have any nuclear power plants under construction. We have several that are slowly being permitted. Right now, China has 28
Oof.
nuclear plants under construction, 4 super refineries. Every week, China and India bring on the equivalent of 250 kilowatt electrical plants, most of those powered with coal because China has huge coal reserves.
Mm.
All of those other things in the United States, we are at zero. And so when you start hearing about the next Manhattan Project, who's going to have the control of the global economies, who's going to have the control of power? China has excess electricity, excess energy production. India is moving very, very quickly. So we were held to these ESG standards by protocols, which I hope Michael talks about a little more here in just a moment. But we were held to these standards with all these accords and these westernized nations. Now, there's a direct correlation between countries that have excess energy production and wealth. What
Mm.
happened to Great Britain when they fell off? Does that mean that they were following the British Empire as they fell off with relevance? Does that follow the same trend line that had to do with their energy capacity? There's a very, very strong correlation in that. So as we move forward in the next 5 to 10 years, who is going to control AI, what country, and who has been hamstringed or who has had their Achilles heels cut. And it is my opinion that the United States, with these ESG regulations going all solar, and I'm an environmental guy. I mean, I'm coming from the environmental space, but when we have so much dense energy and hydrocarbons, and we haven't been able to tap into that like we should have, and we're behind, and we're not tracking in line with our competitors and our enemies in the world with nuclear and all sorts of energy, we are gravely behind. It's going to be like sitting down and imagine this in 10 years if we don't get this corrected and we're not moving forward. And there's a lot of initiatives that are moving us forward right now. And imagine us playing chess against China and China have an IQ of 10,000 and we're sitting there with an IQ of 100. Who's going to control all things with the power that's coming out in the AI race right now? And
David, you
why are
mentioned
we
that there's
allowing that to happen? That's
yeah.
the question.
What is being done to catch up?
There are a lot of initiatives right now. We're seeing a lot of initiatives in Texas right now. We have the Stargate project in Abilene. At one point, that was the world's largest AI complex. Right outside of Amarillo, Texas, where I live, is the Fermi America project. If you have not followed that, FERMI America, they're going to have 4 Westinghouse reactors, 6 turbines, and they're also going to bring on solar and wind for a combined output of 11 gigawatts. 11 gigawatts in an area that we have about 210,000 people in Amarillo, 340 in the MSA around here. But that is more than enough power to power New York City. And it's all going to be going into data centers. And to catch up, it's at least a 10-year runway to get us off. And so 20 projects maybe like that across the United States, none as big as the Fermi right now, but every year there's new projects that come on. But it's all hands on deck. And these are tremendous spends. I mean, they are, hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion to get us caught up. And you just sit there and you go, if we had not had all the regulations to not allow refineries, to not allow nuclear, we have all the natural resources, but it's a clear fundamental issue of us trying to please everyone and not taking care of our national security. And that translates in what was the vehicle to do that? It was ESG. Michael, can you
Interesting.
tell a little bit? I mean, that is my opinion on it.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is what we saw. And then even not the oil and gas companies, how are they going through with your ESG ratings, and how are major corporations influencing like the tier 3 requirements on to subcontractors and small business.
Are they still around? I mean, to what degree do they still have teeth?
It's so if I want to work for, let's say, for instance, some of the largest engineering and construction firms in the United States, they're going to want their ESG scores lower. They're gonna lean on their subcontractors. What are they going to call me and ask me to do? I have a drilling business.
You're going to
They're
have to
going to
follow
call and
suit. Yeah.
I would have to follow suit. Are you going to
Yeah.
use electronic drilling rigs? Well, are
Right.
you going to allow me to charge 3 times the cost? No, you're supposed to do that to get the work. Well, the work volume does not make up for the CapEx spend to do that. How many of your folks are you allowing to work from home? Well, it's pretty hard to have drillers work from home when the drilling sites for environmental work are in the field. So no, I can't have everyone work from home. No, we can't use
Yeah.
Teslas to get to the job sites when you're towing and hauling and you're in the middle of nowhere. And so, but they're leveraging that and they're expecting us to comply to help them get their ESG rating, so their stock price has a favorable rating on the ESG, you know, scoring schedule. And at that point, I mean, we can't do it.
So, Michael,
So the
follow up.
teeth are in it. Yes, the teeth are in it.
Yeah,
You
it
bet.
sounds like it. So, I guess back to Michael. For the layman looking at what you guys are just talking about, it seems like it's a losing battle based on the huge head start that China has against the United States. I hear all of the different things that you talked about in terms of we're trying to catch up. Is there anything to be said for the old adage that the United States excels at innovation while China excels at scaling? Can we make up ground by our innovative culture such that we can actually compete with China? Or, in your opinion, is this just, again, a losing battle?
No, I never think that. I'm an eternal optimist. Looking even beyond this conversation, I don't think David would disagree to say that we are in a spiritual war, and
A spiritual war?
yes, we
Tell me
wrote.
why what do you mean by spiritual war? That's very interesting.
Sure. Well, I think what we're talking about here are the forces of darkness in a lot of different ways. They're being manifest through terms like, finance, and they're being brought up in things when it comes to hydrocarbon, curbing hydrocarbons. But ultimately, what we're talking about is good versus evil. And I think let's just talk about China for just a moment. I had the fortune of being in China just before the pandemic and got to see what the social credit system looks like in China. For those that do not know, that country is run through the social credit system. We talked about carrots and sticks earlier, but in China right now, they use both in this way. So let's say that you jaywalk, right? Well, if you jaywalk, we will get the stick. You'll have your social credit score go down. And if it gets far enough, then you are not able to participate in society. You are locked out. Now, the good part, the carrot part is if you have a good social credit score, then you can also take advantage of different things. So the stakes couldn't be higher. We do not want to live in a world in which China does win the AI arms race, and with it, their entire cultural beliefs, this ideology that you can control a population at scale using technology, using tools like facial recognition, even using AI to predict future behaviors in such a way that a minority report situation goes through, in which the government or working with private companies will say, we believe that you will do this based on your previous actions. Sorry, are you hearing that sound in the background?
I think there is a little bit of background sound there, David. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So,
We'll
anyways,
edit that out.
sure. So what I'm getting at when it comes to this is, number one, I do think that this is not a losing battle, but I do think that, as David mentioned, it's all hands on deck. And I think one way that we begin to win the spiritual battle is that we begin to enlighten people, to awaken them to what is going on. Unfortunately, most people don't know what ESG is, even in the business
No.
sector. And even if they do know what ESG is, they don't understand the danger that it poses. Now, ASG, people like Larry Fink have distanced themselves from the concept of ESG, but it doesn't mean that this is in remission. Far from it. I very much believe that the same things that are fomenting this and creating it they're going to continue. And ultimately, we're talking about power and control. David was mentioning this idea that we're kneecapping American industry. Well, what is deindustrialization? It is being used in much the same way it's been used in Great Britain and other countries to take away the opportunities and the power that the individuals in that country possess. And I'll give you a recent example. David and I were in a conference in Kansas City just a few months ago, and we were talking about what looked like might be another war between the U.S. and Iran, right? And so the countries that are affected, especially in Europe right now, they've been affected by the Ukrainian war. And so many countries, including Great Britain, are at the mercy of Russia to provide them with their energy. They require Gazprom to give them the natural gas, right? So they have limited options because they have deindustrialized. Hopefully, unfortunately, America has seen the light in so many ways. We are not falling for this nonsense of deindustrialization that gives us market power. We can provide for our own energy, and hopefully we continue that trend. We go back to what we were doing just a few years ago, being energy independent. And because if we do that, then we have options in the marketplace, and also we have the freedom to continue our way of life. And just to cap this off, I would say this: we have to change the cultural conversation. America is not an evil country. In fact, America is the best country that the world has ever seen. And we want to export these ideas of freedom that are different from China. That to me is our greatest resource in this fight, to tell a different story and make people realize that we're fighting for good, because we don't want to live in a world in which the Chinese social credit system is writ large in every single country, and that we're living under that kind of tyranny.
And there you go, ladies and gentlemen, is the point of this conversation, right? You just stated it. There's the theme. That's it right there. Mm-hmm. You did a great job of summarizing that. So Michael and David, I don't dispute anything you say, but I want to throw a curveball at you a little bit. So it had to do with your comment about good and evil, which is, it's a provocative thought. It really is. I was listening to an interview with the actor who played the German evil person in Inglourious Bastards. And he was being asked, so how did you tap into this evil side of yourself? I mean, like, what was that like? I mean, did you have to do some sense memory? What did you do to kind of connect with such darkness? And he goes, I don't understand the question. And he goes, no, I mean, like, you killed a lot of people in this movie and you represented such awful things. How did you tap into that to make it seem so authentic? And he goes, my character never thought what he was doing was wrong.
Exactly.
So it's like, he thought he was doing the right thing. And I think that is sort of a metaphor, I think, for all of us in some way, shape, or form, is that we don't wake up and go, I think we're going to be evil today. Now, we may not necessarily agree with our behaviors. Like I have this adage that we judge ourselves based on our intentions. We judge each other based on our actions, and then develop what we think is their intentions. And so when we start talking about good and evil, which I hear your spiritual construct, and I get it, I wonder whether or not the Chinese people would wake up tomorrow morning and say, hey, let's cook up some evil. Well, because you've been in China, I've been in China, I've met some wonderful Chinese people. I don't necessarily agree with their system, but the people themselves, I thought they were delightful.
Well, I agree with you. And I would say what Christopher Wallace is talking about is that everyone is...
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, you know the interview then.
Everyone is the hero of their own life story. And first of all, I don't think the people are at fault here. I definitely think it's the rulers, as always tends to be the case. Mm-hmm. Even if you look at the heart of Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin, they're unlikely to call themselves tyrants and villains. They don't see themselves that way. Right. It's not the way the world works. He's exactly right about that. They are motivated, like all of us are, based on our own goals and objectives, right? They just happen to have more resources available to them to pursue their goals. And what I would say here is, it's necessary for the people who actually have more power than they realize to wake up to what is going on. And I think that we saw a little bit of this during the zero COVID response by the Chinese government, the atrocities that they perpetuated on the people there. They did fight back in a limited capacity. Unfortunately, I think the problem is that humans are lazy by nature and we acclimate. and we seek out comfort, right? And so this type of work requires bravery, and it requires eternal vigilance, to make sure that these types of things do not continue. And it requires people to get involved, to get active, and to inform themselves about what's going on, so that we can make lasting change.
So, David, let me flip it back over to you then. Based on what Michael just said, what can our listener who's hearing this right now, maybe they've been wakened up, not a very good sentence, to this idea. They go, holy crap, this doesn't sound so good. And what I find in myself is that I see all these things. My wife and I have conversations about this stuff all the time. And sometimes I just have to say, I have to stop. I can't handle anymore. I've got enough going on. Let's go for a walk. Too many other outside forces of things that could happen. My little brain can't absorb all this and then continue to walk through my day and be productive. So I have to sort of modulate how much I can take in and how much I can't. But when we do have the energy and the focus and the ability, David, what does a person do with this information?
That's a great question, and that really was the genesis of this project and this book. Michael and I met through a mutual friend. And this is really a unique fact. We worked together on this project for 2 years, never saw each other in person until the book launch. And so we met. We had another project that we were working on. We got to talking about ESG and our alignment on that. Nobody knew what was going on with ESG back in early 2022. I mean, we saw it, and it goes back to the question. We know the human condition, for the most part, is very good. People really want to do good. They want to take care of their families. They want to grow. And so when we're told that the greatest catastrophe facing humanity right now is climate change, and we're going to remove hydrocarbons from the energy cycle, of course, everybody is going to do everything they can because they've been told that the greatest crisis facing humanity is hydrocarbons. And how are we going to do that? We're going to adhere to ESG regulations. We're going to change boards. We're going to redefine the definition of capitalism. But not everybody's doing that. Only select countries have been targeted, and mostly the most successful countries have been targeted to follow this. Michael and I, we were talking about this. We go, hey, this is not right. This is what I'm seeing, boots on the ground in the Permian Basin, in the largest oil producing regions. These are the things that are occurring for us to continue to have energy independence and energy dominance. People don't know what ESG is. Let's write a book and let's tell stories, and let's have these stories very, very simple. So when Dean, you and I and Michael are sitting there at the coffee pot, you go, hey, did you know that China has 28 nuclear power plants and we don't have any? Is that a problem? Because, we're all in the same fishbowl. And if we're all doing it for environmental causes, but yet they're producing more and more and more coal-fired power plants, and that air comes straight across, or we're putting 95% of the world's plastics are coming from 10 rivers in mostly Southeastern Asia and Africa. 95% of the plastics in the oceans are coming from those environments. But we're being penalized. We're being penalized as the largest energy producer, the biggest waster of these resources, which that is not the case. Let's have a conversation about that. 13 chapters with lots and lots of very, very unique 220 footnotes, exhaustive research. But the research is presented that you and I can have that conversation, and we can say to ourselves, this doesn't feel right. Let's take a look and let's dive in a little deeper. And going back to your question, we are bombarded with so much information. I believe that a colonial American in the United States, a colonial American, their entire reading and amount of knowledge that they received, with the exception of the Bible, was a Sunday edition of the New York Times. Imagine how much, Dean, you and Michael and I have already gotten since Sunday. I mean, no wonder we're going batshit crazy, because we can't. I don't know if I can say that on here, but we can't absorb it. That's why we have to shut down. When an American youth right now has an attention span of 6.2 seconds, and a goldfish has an attention span of 8.4, it's proven something is wrong. We are just overloading. We're overloading ourselves. And so how do you look at the reality versus what's not. How many sources are telling us what they want us to believe? Everyone believes that we need to take care of the environment, but is it being adhered to all over the world? And when we don't have the energy production to take care of the very basic necessities in this country, and our enemies do, there's something wrong in the narrative.
So, who's behind all this, and who benefits from it?
That's a great question,
I
Michael.
mean, who's the person behind the screen in The Wizard of Oz who's pulling all of the strings that is not visible to the rest of us? I mean, we've heard things like the cabal. We heard things, I remember when I was a kid, I wrote a paper called The Bohemian Grove, about a bunch of really very wealthy, smart industry leaders basically making policy behind closed doors and behind the headlines of newspapers. But what is your sense? Who's the beneficiary of all of this?
Well, I don't think there's a monolithic group that you can point to, but I mean,
is it ideology? Is it control?
Well, I think it's a little more than that, but I'll answer that in 1 second. But
Okay.
The fact that you know about the Bohemian Grove, most people don't know what that is, and you know that it's real.
Yeah.
There are many other aspects to this story that I don't think we have time to get into today, but we can certainly do it at a certain point. But the people that would go to the Bohemian Grove, the people that would go to Davos, the people that would read Klaus Schwab's book and see it as a rallying call that was somehow written in 2020 within 2 or 3 months of the pandemic occurring, but he has a solution for the Great Reset. Let's look at the people who benefit from this, right? That's a very famous Latin line, right? Who benefits? Well, I think if you think to yourself who would benefit from this, you have your answer. Now, I'd say there are a lot of those people, you and I will never know their names. They don't show up on any list of the most wealthy people in the world, and for obvious reasons. But if you can look at just the people who do participate in the things like the World Economic Forum, they look at the young global leaders. So Justin Trudeau was a young leader. So is Elon Musk. If you look into Elon Musk's family and you know anything about the technocracy movement, you'll know that this isn't a recent development. It goes back many centuries. And so that I would look to those types of groups, the obvious ones, the people that do go to Bilderberg, the people that do go to the World Economic Forum. And you would look at the public-private partnerships. Who benefits from a situation like this? Look to people like Peter Thiel and the people that are they're basically funding him and the people that are involved in this. So those are the types of people that would benefit from a situation like this.
So you guys are probably familiar with the book called The Fourth Turning,
Yes.
which basically every 80 years we recycle another set of turnings, if you will. And according to the book, I'm not going to go into the whole background of it, but according to the book, we're in the last turning. It'll start over again here, maybe in 2030 or a little bit before. And then we're in the crisis, right? And one could kind of say, yeah, wait, that feels right. That feels intuitive. But I always look at that also, Michael, from your standpoint of a cup half full perspective, to say like the shoots of spring are already coming out of the winter of which we are a part, meaning that there's already change that once it becomes manifest and it grows into adolescence and adulthood, that becomes the beginning of our new turning, I should say, and things become much more aligned, right? Right now it's very divisive and it's very counter to one another. So if you believe in that, what are the signs of spring?
I'm happy to take that one unless you want to say it.
Well, I think it's a fantastic book. If any of the listeners have not read it, it's a fantastic book, and it really, on the centuries and in the timelines of the centuries and why that was so relevant in Roman, Roman culture, and there is so much. And I think one of the great pieces of that is, every 20 years you have or every 80 years the major war, and dad goes off to war and comes back, and kids are playing war in the front yard. Don't. War is awful. War is horrible. And then those kids grow up, and then their kids don't have the realization of what war is. And then I liken it to, a high school fight where you got two alpha guys that are both pretty tough, and they go out in the parking lot and fight. And then they realize fighting's not very good because it took a long time to heal, and I lost an eye, and you got a broke jaw, and whatever, but so that stops that. I think the world is very ready for a fight right now. I think everyone is going, but if that is going to happen, I mean, we've had 75, 80 years of just the most prosperous times. I mean, if you read Hans Rosling, Factfulness, have you read Factfulness? Really, how wonderful is the world? It's better than it's ever been for the human condition. What all three of us experienced this morning was better than any king. When we got up in our house, we took a hot shower, we had our coffee from wherever we get our coffee, we read the news, and it was in a perfectly controlled environment. We are living the best anybody has ever lived, but yet it's time to fight. So is the season going to change? Is that century or that turning going to be shortened or lengthened with the amount of knowledge going back to that? What are the shoots of spring? We could argue both sides that AI, is that going to start the next renaissance, or is that going to bring the end? What is that power going to be used for? The shoots are, in my opinion, opportunity. Now, we're not talking about ESG anymore. ESG was clearly a detriment, in my opinion. But what is the opportunity with the knowledge that we're going to have? Michael Jordan, what was it? Ability is the great equalizer. Talent is the great equalizer. Education is the great equalizer. All of those things now are available. I mean, remember growing up, you were badass if your grandparents had encyclopedias, right? And you could go read the encyclopedias, and an hour or 2 hours later, you'd be sitting there and there'd be 10 encyclopedias around you because you had chased all the rabbit holes. Now we rabbit hole all day long.
Right.
And what can we create? What can the human condition create out of all of this if we stop the impediments of things like ESG? That's, in my opinion, what the shoots of spring look like.
Okay.
We really and truly are on the verge of greatness, but we have let our laurels down as a human, in the human condition and as a nation by following blindly that the greatest threat is global warming and cutting off our energy supplies, instilling boards that are following not the strongest, but an inclusivity of everyone, and a governance against the very foundations of capitalism.
So I think that's a great way to put a nice little bow on this conversation. Thank you, David. Thank you, Michael, for your insights. This has just been fascinating, and I think it helps our listeners get an awareness beyond our four walls out into the world and really start talking about this. How can people follow what you do? Tell us a little bit more about your book, LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera.
Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, sure. Well, you can check it out at creativedestruction.com, isn't it? Is that
yes.
And then
creativedestructionbook.com.
Yeah, absolutely.
The website,
And Amazon. The book is available for purchase right now. Check it out. We'd love for you to read it and leave us a comment, leave us a review.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then both of us on LinkedIn, we both have our LinkedIn channels, and you can follow that through the website. And when you go to Amazon, Creative Destruction ESG will get you there very, very quickly.
Good.
And so we would love your support on that, and Michael will sign all the books you send to him and mail them back to you. So, and I'll sign them too. So
sounds good. Well, guys, thanks,
folks. Yeah,
thanks so much for your time and your energy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dean.
Thank you for listening to Leadovation with Dean Newland. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com, or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadovation.